Welcome back, everyone. I really love what I do. I get to meet so many interesting people in all of the interviews we do. And then every once in a while, I have to confess, it's a result of the creative curse, which means if you were born with the creative curse, and some of you know what I'm talking about, it stays with you your whole life. Oh, you might paint, you might sculpt, but you might play an instrument. Everybody knows that there's a band right in our community called the Hot Club of Saratoga that kicks butt. It's just one of these really cool kind of collective eccentric jazz ensembles. And joining me today is somebody who's going to really tell you about this. This is Chuck Kirsch, who's the guitarist for the Hot Club of Saratoga and born with the creative curse and kind of an organizer of this band. So hello, Chuck.
Hi, how you doing? It's a pleasure to
Good.
be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I was so excited about doing this. Couple of reasons. You've got one heck of an ensemble there.
Oh,
Really
thank you.
very, very talented group. And also, you're doing something that a lot of our people in our audience have heard the name Django Reinhardt, but they're not exactly sure why they heard it or whatever. And then all of a sudden, a musician like Willie Nelson will say, "This is a musician that changed my life." And you're
Yeah.
thinking to yourself, who the heck is this person? And what you do under the banner of Gypsy Jazz is really, it's steeped in the origins of Django Reinhardt's music. So we got a lot to talk about. Why don't we start?
Sounds good. I'm all in.
Yeah, I bet you are. Hey, how about Gypsy Jazz? Let's start there. What the heck is that?
Well, it was, obviously like all kinds of music back when they started doing it, they just called it jazz, you know. And we call it gypsy jazz now because of Django being a French gypsy. And back then, jazz, it started in France, around Paris. There was a club called the Hot Club of France. And they were a group of jazz enthusiasts that would bring over a lot of the American jazz records and stuff and have meetings and talk about it and things like that. Well, Django was playing in Paris since he was 12 years old as a profession. And he was in a club one night where Stefan Grappelli was playing with an orchestra, and Django was also playing too. And they got together backstage. This is the story, the legend, right? The myth. And they got together during breaks backstage and were playing, and it was just like, wow, this is amazing. And so some of the people in the Hot Club of France heard about it and stuff and started to try to promote them a little bit. And Django then became they became the quintet of the Hot Club of France. What was different about his take or their take on jazz is back then, every jazz band had a drummer, often a piano and things like that. This band was, and horns. This band was purely strings. There were actually three guitars, two rhythm players, and Django on lead, and Stefan Grappelli on violin and bass, upright bass. No drummer. The rhythm guitarist basically have almost two functions. They play chords, so you get the chords behind it with the harmonies, and also it's a very percussive style. So they more or less take the place of the drummer. And so it became something very different. And basically, that's how it became something very unique. And they started playing, and they played around Paris a lot. Went right. Well, there's a whole history of their playing and where Stefan was and all that. But that became what we now know as gypsy jazz. And so when you hear, like, we are the Hot Club of Saratoga, there are hot club bands all around the world. And it's the Hot Club of San Francisco, the Hot Club of DC, the Hot Club of Baltimore, the Hot Club of Detroit. Anytime you hear that, it's basically a hot jazz. It's hot swing, hot jazz, gypsy jazz, jazz manouche. It's that style of music, basically paying homage to Django and his music.
Yeah, you mentioned the word manouche. I was going to mention that. I think that is French for gypsy.
It is.
It
It
is,
is.
right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
we got to get back into this because I knew about that setup. When I
Yeah.
first found out about him, and his brother played with him, right?
Yes, Joseph. I played the guitar that Joseph played on all those recordings.
Oh my
Woo, what a
God.
guitar.
Well, you
Yeah.
know what? But the other thing about Reinhardt, Django, is that a lot of people pay attention to a guitarist to the left hand because it's moving all over
Yeah.
the fret and playing all the notes. he's remarkable at that. The notes that he picks out are really, really, really sharp. But if you want to really understand the percussive thing you were talking about, pay attention to his right hand.
Yeah,
Because the
yeah.
rhythms that
Just,
he came out with his right hand, you know, I think it
yeah,
was Wynton Marsalis who commented on it once, said that, he just didn't understand how he was able to coordinate that and sync that up
yeah,
so perfectly.
yeah. Well, the other amazing thing about Django is when he was 18, he was in a fire, a tragic fire. He had come home from Paris from playing and went to, he lived in a gypsy camp outside of Paris in a caravan, in an old wooden caravan. And he knocked some things over. The whole thing went ablaze, and he got everybody out, but he was severely burned on his left side, and he almost lost. They wanted to amputate his leg, in fact, but he wouldn't let them. It took him a year to recover, and as a result of the fire, these two fingers in his left hand, his fretting hand, were permanently, basically, formed like this. And so it took him an entire year to basically reform the way he played. So all those hot, fiery solos are with two fingers. And what makes gypsy jazz also a little different is because of that, he had to reform how he plays chords. And so his I call them grips. His chords were different than a lot of people played. And so, without getting into all the technicalities, gypsy jazz guitarists, especially the rhythm, but all of us, play certain chord grips that are not commonly used. I mean, every jazz player can play them, but they're performed a little differently. And that's part of what sets the music apart, too.
To our viewers, there are a lot of examples on YouTube
Yeah.
of Django playing, and you can actually see. I had read about
Yes.
that situation. Can you imagine? You know what it's like as a musician. If someone said to you, "Excuse me, I'm just going to take away two fingers on your left hand,"
Yeah.
try playing. Think
Yeah.
about that for a second, because
Well,
of the way
I
you
did that.
learn
I did
guitar.
yeah, I did sort of that, even playing rhythm. I also build some guitars. I try to build guitars, and I cut the tip of my finger off with a scalpel right here one day, and I had gigs that weekend. One of them I couldn't go to, but it was a mess, and it was bandaged up for a week or two. And I literally got into the meat, and it was like, so that weekend I tried playing chords without this finger, and you can do it, but you have to to try to rethink all that. It's like, oh my God, this is insane. And then I thought, well, Django did it with, what the heck?
And now try soloing the same way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
Hey, I'd written a whole bunch of notes here. Django had, he listened to Duke Ellington, which you can kind of think, oh, by the way, the Stefan that Chuck's referring to is Stefan Grappelli, the famous
Yes,
violinist. So
yes.
those of you who are
Ooh,
like, oh, yeah, that's right.
yeah,
But, I also looked up some of the modern musicians and what they had to say about him. Because, you listen to him, and of course, in retrospect, when you see the recordings, some as early as from the 40s, right? They're amazing.
Oh, even the 30s. They were really hot in the 30s.
Yes, again, that I do know.
Yeah,
But I'm talking about the recordings that at least I was able to
yeah, yeah, yeah.
source. But all of a sudden, you understand a little bit more about how Wes Montgomery, for instance,
Yes,
did his
yes.
phrasings and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the
Yeah,
legendary musicians. Jeff Beck
yeah,
played great tribute to him. Paul McCartney did. And of course,
yeah.
Willie Nelson.
If you look at any modern guitarist just about, and you ask them what their influences are, it's amazing. Almost all of them, near the top of that list, is Django Reinhardt. There were other people doing what he was doing at the time, not just didn't get, there's Oscar Aleman was doing some great stuff, but Django just kind of captured everybody's imagination, and he was well ahead of his time in the way he was playing, his phrasing, his just his choice of notes, playing out notes and in notes, and just when you listen to him, just amazing.
It is. It is really amazing. I hope our audience is hanging in here. I know Chuck and I are getting a little in the weeds here, but
I know this can get real Django nerdy here.
but really, and the reason we're doing that is that he unfortunately died very young age, unexpectedly.
Yeah,
And
43.
and it on the 23rd of January is his actual birthday. And Chuck and his band are doing something at the Linda. That's the theater in Albany, the WAMC theater in Albany. So tell us what you're doing on the 23rd.
Well, we wanted to. We've talked about this for a while, the fellows in the band and I, and we wanted to celebrate Django's birthday. So our bassist Dylan talked to somebody at the Linda. And they said, "Yeah, let's do this." So what we're doing is putting on a Django's birthday celebration, and rather than put it on the weekend when it's easy, for everybody, which a lot of people around the country are doing, we said, let's keep it real. Let's make it on Django's birthday. Going to really celebrate. So we put together a kind of a afternoon into evening festival, and I say afternoon meaning 4:15, where we're going to have workshops, a few workshops from 4:15 to 6:15, no, something like that, 90 minutes anyway. At maybe it's 4:45. Sorry, all these numbers just keep swirling around. So we're going to have a guitar workshop with Brad Rose, who's an amazing guitarist, travels the world to festivals and teaches. We're going to have a violin workshop with Adrien Chevalier, and he's French, been living in New York for about 10 years, and they play together in a couple different bands. And so he's going to do a violin workshop, and I'm going to do a beginning rhythm workshop, gypsy jazz rhythm, to just show people, what the La Pomp is the style it's called, and that's, as you were saying, the right hand and left hand coordinating. It's called La Pomp, means the pump, because you're constantly pumping this music to be very percussive and show people some chords. So we'll be doing that. And then at 7:00, Hot Club of Saratoga will play. At around 8:00, Adrien Chevalier will play with his band with Brad Rose. So they're wonderful. They're coming up from New York. Brad actually is our lead guitarist who lives in New York now. So we don't get to play with him quite as often as we want. And so he'll play with us and with Adrian. And then at around 9:00, we're going to have about an hour-long jam. So anybody from the gypsy jazz community, anybody who's interested in learning some of this stuff, anybody who wants to just come and listen. Gypsy jazz is it's such a fun music. When we first got together as a band, we used to rehearse in my living room, have the window open. And my neighbor one day, she said to me, "Every time you guys rehearse, I just open my windows wide because it's so good. The music, it just makes me happy." And the music just kind of affects people that way, And I was like, yeah, that's the ticket. That's what it is. It's like, it's a music that's just lively and alive, and also can be beautiful in some of the waltzes and some of the ballads. And it's wonderful music. And it's a great introduction to jazz, because it's easy, you can relate to it.
Yeah, when you were saying that, I was just thinking and something, you and I share this, Chuck, as musicians our whole life, you really look to the forms of music that are real. And, the blues comes to mind immediately. And they often say, if you didn't feel it, you can't play it. And then you think about being a gypsy in Europe during that time. Yeah. And you think about just this sort of energy of wanting to project yourself. And the way to do that is a very percussive feel. Yet there's also a real sensitivity about it, because a lot of Django's music was in minor keys also.
Oh, yes.
So you had this wonderful emotion and mood and things like that.
Yes.
All right, our audience is going, holy mackerel. Okay, I get it. On the bottom of the screen, you'll see a web address, hotclubofsaratoga.com. I highly encourage you, go to the website, find out what's going on the 23rd at the Linda, which is the auditorium, WAMC's auditorium in Albany. I think tickets are $20 or something like that. But go to the workshops, go to the performances, and sit in and listen to the jam. You'll really learn something.
Yeah, and part of our goal is to promote and build the gypsy jazz community here. Because when I started playing, just before I was lucky enough to meet these guys for a band, there was nobody in this area that was playing. And I started Hot Club of Saratoga literally as a club, like the Hot Club of France, to try to find people who with like mind who were interested in this music. And it's grown since then tremendously. Our band came out of it. There's another band in the area now, Helderberg Hot Club, some friends of ours, and there's a lot of people. We have a jam every third. There's a jam every third Tuesday in Troy at the oh geez, it's just gone at the Ale House. There's a first Tuesday jam every month in Albany. And so the gypsy jazz community is really growing, and it's a wonderful group of people just trying to explore this fantastic music.
Yeah, Chuck. Well, Chuck, it was so nice talking to you about this. Really, you can probably tell from the smile on my face, I was really looking forward to talking with you.
I know this has been a thrill. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. And to our audience, again, look at the web address on the bottom of the screen. I got to run, but please go there, find out what's going on. All right, Chuck, it was really great talking to you. And I'll see you on the 23rd.
Sounds great. Thanks so much. Take care.
You're welcome.